This is Mark Whitten.
This is Adam MacArthur.
This is Ann Yatko.
This is Molly Chung.
Hey everybody, this is Michael Yurchak.
This is Daquan Wilshire.
This is Lexi Nieto.
This is Rico Fajardo, and you're watching.
And you're listening to Spoiler Force Podcast. Set your heart ablaze.
All right, so this is Spoiler Force Podcast. My name is Ricky, and thank you for tuning in. Episode 182, you can see the title, Jujutsu Kaisen Manga Review. I have Salem back on the podcast again. Thank you so much for being back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been so long since I've talked to you last time. I think you were on the Kobayashi episode, and that was the last time we recorded.
Yes,
I want to say...
I think I was still in the States when that happened. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was just before you went to Japan. I for fans who are following Salem, she's in Japan, so she's living that anime life. Definitely follow her. I love seeing her stories on Instagram. It's so cool seeing that. But yeah, Japan looks great on you. You're living a really cool life right now. So fans, follow Salem, please. For those who are listening, if you don't know Salem, I've had episodes with her on the podcast. You can check them out. But yeah, she's someone that I go to when we were talking about like just manga or anime. Because you're out of the country, I haven't been able to talk to you too much about like just our what we've been watching or reading. But Jujutsu Kaisen's been the topic that I've constantly messaged you before the manga wrapped up. Like it was just us weekly or bi-weekly, just like, did you read this? Did you read this? And it just us
the spoilers
down,
coming out.
Yeah, just spoilers, breaking down the chapters. What's happening to what are we gonna guess who's gonna go next? But before we just start getting into our JJK talk, fans, this is your spot to cut it off right now, because if you've not read the manga or watched any of the anime, we are going heavy spoilers. I know season 3 just got announced too, but we're going to be covering everything from the end of season 2 till the most recent chapters of the manga. I know Gege's been doing like art shows, and if you go on X or Twitter, there's all that stuff being revealed, like the new chapters, new artwork, all these new things that's been promoting JJK. So please go check that out too. But okay, so let's get to it. Salem, overall, what are your thoughts on Jujutsu Kaisen?
So I think when I started Jujutsu Kaisen, it was actually when the anime very first came out, and so I was watching week to week the anime. Before I finally got into the manga because I got impatient. I think as a shonen anime and shonen manga, very well done. I think we had some pacing things along the way, but I mean, that's shonen in general. But I really love the way that Gege handled a lot of the character developments that a lot of our characters had. Of course, I have some beef with some of that as well. I think it had it's really great moments, and it also had some really weak moments. But overall, I mean, it's something that I would definitely suggest to people who are watching anime, have never watched anime. It's something that's really easy to get into. But I mean, I loved it. I have Jujutsu Kaisen tattoos, so like, what can I really say against it?
Yeah, same for me. I thought it's a great way I think it's an anime that's great to introduce people who are new to anime. I think that's a great gateway for folks to just kind of get into a story, no fillers, no prolonging chapters or stories, not too many backstories for each character like the tropey animes before it. I really liked how, you can see the inspirations that Gege has from Jujutsu Kaisen from other animes, from Bleach or even a little bit of My Hero and stuff like that. There's he kind of gives homage to them, which I liked a lot. I really love his character designs that he has in the show. I think they're very unique, and of course, like everyone's favorite, Gojo is the one that stands out the most. I know Gojo was one of your favorites too.
Yes, always.
So I think that's what made Jujutsu Kaisen stand out so much, because of how just these characters look. It's kind of like more modern day instead of like its own universe, or like it's not like it's not like Naruto where it's like its own made up country and its own realm. It's pretty much like you feel like you're watching these people outside of like the States, or you're following them on social media, because they have a lot of mentions of like Yuji talks about his favorite girl is Jennifer Lawrence, and there's the Shibuya event that takes place during Halloween. There's so many like moments
goodness.
in Jujutsu Kaisen that's really relatable to viewers to watch, and that's what I like. But since we talked about Gojo, besides him being your favorite character, were there any characters that you thought were like stood out to you or were one of your favorites aside from Gojo?
Sure, yeah. So I would say Gojo is probably actually my second favorite, though I
Okay.
do love him dearly, as most people do. It's definitely Maki. And I feel like a lot of girl manga readers and anime watchers will agree with me that she's really like the most well done female character in a while that I've seen in a shonen anime. Especially because her whole thing is that she's strength based, right? Like she has no powers, it's just her strength. So, and seeing her arc, obviously with the Zenin situation where she goes through and finally, like she loses Mai, which is like a huge deal for her. And we see this really like kind of heartbreaking moment between the two twin like sisters that we have not seen. We have not seen them be kind to each other. We have not seen them like be sisterly. It's been very like contentious and things are bad with them pretty much all the time. But we do get like in their final moments, we get to see that Mai has like always loved Maki and vice versa. And then that kind of gives way for Maki's strength to essentially double into Toji levels. And she just gets, I love a good revenge story, right? Like
Yes.
seeing that whole arc played out for her, especially in the middle of everything else that was happening in the manga. It was really nice just to see some wins. I consider them wins for our characters. So that is something I think Gege did really well. Do I think she was treated super nicely towards the end of the manga? Not so much, but I do think in that big chunk in the middle where she's kind of she's completing her character and like she's getting her strength and losing things that are dear to her. I think that was really, really well done.
Yeah, her story arc was something I wasn't expecting at all. I know
Right.
that there was a lot of like build up for her character. You see that she's someone who has the heavenly restriction on her. She's got a lot more to prove, and then I didn't really like her character. I liked her character, but I liked her character a lot more during the Jujutsu Kaisen Zero movie. Once they were showing her in that, you kind of see her backstory a little bit more, and you see how she's very she has her walls up, and she's very guarded as a person. And then towards reading the manga, seeing her doing her Itachi moment to the Zenin clan,
Yeah.
she's a complete badass, and that's what I love about her. I have like figures of her now. I have prints of her, which I plan to hopefully like put up in my room soon.
Yeah.
But but she's one of my favorites, man. Like she's awesome, and I'm glad that they gave a character like her that kind of power level. It wasn't just being overshadowed by like Yuji or Yuta or all the other characters that they've given her like a place to stand amongst all these strong characters.
Right.
One of my favorite characters personally was Yuta. Definitely because of the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's just something about Yuta that I felt like really relatable to. I think he was just someone that he was just in a circumstance that he didn't want to be in, and everything fell onto him. And then with Gojo guiding him, showing him that your powers, you can control them, you just have to learn how to use it. And then seeing his growth from the beginning all the way to the end, I really just respect his character. And especially the part where he's talking to the group about like someone has to be the monster, it can't just fall on Gojo. And that's where I really appreciated his character, because he's the only one who's willing to do it, and
Right.
that's what I like. And of course, he's definitely more soft spoken, but once he gets into that fight where he's like in his zone, he's just a complete monster. So I love that about Yuta. Was there any other characters that you liked in the whole like show or manga?
Sure. Obviously Nobara. I love her to death. I do think she is one of the characters that kind of highlights Gege's weak points in storytelling. Because we do have like Nobara was very central to the plot and our trio for, a solid good 2 seasons before obviously she was killed in Shibuya. And I think one of the weak points of that was that she wasn't even really shown to have affected the narrative all that much. I think Yuji mentions her one time with Angel, where he's like, I don't want Angel to replace her. But since then, we hadn't really gotten a whole lot of like flashbacks of her, or like that the boys could even really focus on anything like that, because they were obviously dealing with the culling games. So I do think if her death had had more maybe echoes throughout the story, that would make more sense to me. I almost didn't like that she got brought back at the end, because it just kind of felt like he pushed her out of the story to bring her back only when she was useful again, which kind of like ruined a lot of what she had going on. Like the chair scene is one of my favorite scenes in the entire manga, of her talking about how she only has so many seats in her life and so many people who can sway what she decides in life. I think that was a really great moment to kind of show that, you know, though people may think that she's cold or that her behavior is kind of shut off, she does allow those people in, and those people matter a lot to her. And so I love that kind of mentality in a character, especially a female character, because usually we get kind of tropes of women of like cold and, you know, unapproachable, or like bubbly and very happy. Like we get those little pockets of character designs. But Nobara kind of combined all of them. Like she loved being beautiful. She loved shopping. She was also cold and a little rude a lot to Yuji there in the beginning.
Yeah.
But she, you know, recognizes that Yuji was one of those people that came in and sat down in her life, and now he mattered, and that mattered to her. So I also love Nobara for that. All my favorite characters are usually women. That's just how it goes. And then there's Gojo, of course.
I think you called it though. We were like messaging at one point about like how the crew was going to defeat Sukuna, and you mentioned to me like, you know, because they had that extra finger that they didn't tell anyone where they had it. You kind of like, I remember reading that you were saying like, you know, most likely Nobara is going to be the one that she's going to be the one that causes the effect on Sukuna, or at least cause him to get delayed in his actions, because like when we were reading that whole like just that whole arc of them fighting, he was wiping the floor with everyone. So like we were just, you know, messaging each other like, how's he gonna, you know, how are they gonna stop him? You know, they've used their domain expansions. Everyone's using their aces and their powers. Like they're going all out. And yeah, you brought that up, and of course you made the call. So I was like, yeah, you called it. You know, you made the call.
Yeah, I think her power being able to resonate with souls, I was like, okay. Especially when Megumi got taken over, I was like, there's no way they just killed my boy Megumi just like that. So it was kind of nice to see her pulled back specifically for that. Obviously, I wanted her to come back. I do just wish it was a little bit sooner, so we had a little bit more of her in those times.
Yeah, that's the thing I didn't like either, is like, because we kind of like predicted that, I just didn't like, as the chapters were winding down, because everyone's like, oh no, there's only like this many chapters left before it's done. I was messaging him like, dude, when is she gonna come back? Because there's only like 2 or 3 chapters left. They're just gonna cram all this information in, you know, and that's what I kind of did not like. I was hoping she'd jump in the fight, and like you see her and Yuji just again do that duo tag team and fight Sukuna, but we didn't really get that. But you know, I'm glad she's back. But like you said, I kind of wish Gege did more with that, instead of just like throwing her in there, one nice panel, and then that's it, you know.
Right. I think that also she really kind of embodied, if like skip to what I was thinking about with the trio, it was a lot of what we've seen in the manga overall was, you know, Jujutsu is a single sport. Like Gojo has a big like monologue about it with Megumi, about how, you know, when you die by yourself. It's really just you, like you can't rely on people. So I do like how Gege throughout the series, like we rarely see Yuji fight by himself, right? We always see Gojo fight alone, obviously for obvious reasons, but we almost never see Yuji fight by himself. I think Chozo and Yuji was one of the few fights where, you know, we kind of do see him fight by himself with no outside help, with no one else being around. So that final fight being the 3 of them all fighting together to win kind of shows that the next generation doesn't have to be lonely like Gojo's was. Gojo and Geto both obviously inflicted with the lonely syndrome, with being one of the strongest, where you can be strong and you can also work together. So I do think that was a nice way to kind of wrap up that theme, is to have all 3 of them work together. But I do think it was kind of crammed into one. I think Gege was tired.
Yeah.
They were ready. So,
you know, now that you bring that up, I absolutely love this theme amongst like JJK overall. Just like, you know, you brought this up to me a lot too. It made me realize like, man, you know, it's true. Gojo is the one that's like guiding his students and telling them like, don't be by yourself. You know, like he's like telling them, I've been by myself. I know what it's like to be by myself. And he wants his students to fight together, be together, whether they live or they die, they're together, you know, and not be like Gojo, and you know, there's times where me and you both talked about like how, you know, it's just so sad seeing the story of Gojo and Geto, and I think that's one
Yes.
of my favorite stories. Like they're seeing their
Yeah.
friendship fall apart, their fallout, to where, you know, in Shibuya where Gojo sees the fake Geto, you know, he's like, man, like you're Geto, but my six eyes sees like you're not him, you know.
Right. Like he knows. Yeah. I think their story actually is one of the most interesting part of the entire series for me. I almost would have rather started the series when they were teenagers and it gone from there. It
Yeah.
would be a much longer series, obviously. But I think that would really encapsulate, like, we see the breakdown, we see all of these different things affecting Gojo and Geto and how the Jujutsu world kind of just breaks them down. And then we get to see the two different paths, right? We get to see Geto decide he's going to break down the world that has broken him down, to live in a better world in his mind. And then we see Gojo who goes, okay, I may have suffered, but I can help the next generation not suffer. So I kind of love that we get flashes of it. And I think it's obviously a theme that follows through the entire series, but I would have loved to see more of it. Especially there at the end where we get the Sukuna Gojo fight. He even kind of feels for Sukuna, right? Because he's like, this guy is the strongest. He's me. I'm going to try and show him something else. Whether or not he does, I'm going to say probably not. I think Yuji does that for Sukuna. But still, that character dynamic and that kind of theme is one of my favorite parts of Jujutsu Kaisen.
Yeah, same for me. That's what I like about the show, and you know, outside of like, I think it's just like when it's storytelling like that, like where it's underlined, like, you know, everything's so overshadowed by like the fighting or like the blood and the action. Like people kind of miss those themes or like the dialogue, and that's what I love about Jujutsu Kaisen. But you know, I guess we can get into like just more of the story arcs right here. I know that there's just so much to talk about, you know, from after Shibuya to the Culling Games to there's like so many fights in between, you know. And was there we'll be talking about the ending later on in this episode, but was there anything like whether it was a certain arc or certain fight that you enjoyed the most in Jujutsu Kaisen?
Yeah, so I think this kind of touches on one of the weak points that I think the last arcs had, and there was just so much happening constantly. I mean, we get introduced to a ton of new characters, like, you know, we get more with Angel, we get, you know, Hikari, a lot more of Hikari, which I love. We get Kamo, we get like all these different people. It almost feels like that arc for me was like a blur. Like it was just like me trying to figure out what was happening, what's going on. And then we also have a ton of new techniques, which I think is also kind of a weak point because we get all these new techniques and they have to be explained, right? And they are like pages and pages of like explanation. And some of them are very scientific. And I remember just sitting there going like, oh, I need to lock in. I have to focus on what's being told right now because I don't understand. And I feel like that was kind of a shared experience, right? Because you're just like, I'm trying to watch people fight, but I also need to understand what they're saying and what their powers are. But in terms of fights that I really did enjoy, I really enjoyed Hikari's fight with Yurahime. I think that was one of the most memed fights for sure, with his Jordans. But it was because it was two characters that I had already understood, right? We saw Hikari's, like his domain and everything is already kind of silly, but it is really fun because it's a gamble, right? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going on. And we have him fighting against someone who is just ready to fight, who like has a way to win, but doesn't take it because he just wants to be fighting at the fullest, which I think is great. I think that's a great character arc because then we also see him fly after Sukuna later, right? So that was probably my favorite fight in all of those, which was still kind of towards the end.
And that was a really good fight too. And I gotta say, Hikari's his domain is so broken. Just gambling and then just hitting jackpot after jackpot. Like the dude's immortal for like that amount of time. And I can't wait till they animate that because he's gonna be drawing a lot of fans in with his powers.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to hear the song. I need to hear the song.
Oh man, that's what I can't wait. Like once they start adding music and like the animation and sound effects, I think it's gonna surpass what we've read in the manga Because
Oh yeah.
I think I've done that too already because I know that when they did the Sukuna versus the Magura fight, like it wasn't even finished when they released it online, and then once the Blu-ray came out, it's done. So it
It's
actually
crazy.
was more enhanced.
Yeah, I think that'll be a strong point in the anime, but was a weak point in the manga. I think
Yeah.
fights in general in manga, I don't know if other manga readers have this problem where like your eyes are looking at it, but you don't really know what's happening. You're like, people are getting hit and they're flying places, but you can't really like it's hard with the panels to kind of conceptually visualize how the fight is going. So at least with the anime, you can see that all, fully realized. And I think that's going to look really cool.
Well, hopefully they add more with when Hikari fights Irame, because reading the manga, they were having their beach episode. Like we didn't know what was going on.
They were gone for so long. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I do like that, but as well as when he fights is it Kamo, the lightning?
Yeah. Kashimo.
Kashimo.
Yeah.
That fight as well. Like that is one of my favorite. Like anything with Hikari, like he is doing things in such a flashy way that I'm like, yes, I want to be watching whatever he's doing.
Yeah, Kashimo was pretty hyped up too. I spoke with the artist friend of mine. We were like, I think it was just before they wrote him off. So we were like, oh man, what do you think he's gonna do against Sukuna? He's like this really hyped sorcerer.
Just fun.
Yeah, and within
seconds.
the chapter, he was done. I was like, oh man, way to hype them up.
But you know what? It's how he wanted to go. So fair enough.
Yeah. And I think with Gege writing all these like sorcerers and different characters, it kind of gave me almost like an old school like Naruto Bleach feel, where there's just like you don't know who's who, and then again, like you said, learning their powers, like who's gonna survive out of these characters. And so I kind of like that feeling, but again, like you said, it's just learning the techniques, and then again, simple domain versus domain expansion, and then like the curse energy output. It was just so much at once, and I had to go to you. I'm like, do you get this? Because I didn't get it. I was like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people, I mean, even me, I had to sit down and like really think about what was happening. And I think that's just a weakness actually of the world that Gege created, unfortunately, because like cursed domains and like, cursed output and all of the different domain expansions, those are all unlimited, right? Like he has no real rules for his magic system. So it was just kind of a free for all at that point. I think we see that a lot with Gojo and Sukuna as well. Like that fight, a lot of new things were introduced too quickly for me to be like, okay, this feels like a good thought out fight. It was more of like everyone's getting new things constantly to outdo each other. Like, oh, I have this new thing. And then Sukuna's like, oh, I have a thing that is just for that thing. And it's a lot of back and forth. And that made it feel a little like stunted.
Oh, the binding vows.
Yes.
Everyone is like binding vow like crazy. Like,
Yes.
oh, I'm just, I'm not gonna look at the floor for 5 seconds. That's my binding vow. Like it was something so dumb like that, but it just like like with Toto, right? Because Toto did a binding vow to expand his range. Like really, they couldn't just say like he just got stronger and he was able to do it. Like it just everyone had a binding vow, and then towards the end where they were like, so how do we break all these binding vows now? Because it's gonna be with us forever. And then it's like, oh, what's his name? The guy with the sword.
Higuruma, the lawyer guy. Oh no, the simple domain.
Yes, the guy who can do simple domain.
This is what I'm talking about. What are their names? I don't know.
I just know their powers.
Yeah.
But yeah, the guy with the simple domain, he was like, oh, I'm from a lineage of like, of sorcerers where we can break those laws. Like, really? Like
so OP. And he's been like so lazy and so scared the whole series. Like every time something comes up, he's like, I would like to leave.
Yeah.
And then we find out that he's just like so strong. Which, you know what? I love that for him. That's actually pretty hilarious. But yeah, I mean, even I feel like that last fight with Sukuna, it was really just everybody being thrown at him. And it was hard for me to kind of believe that Yuji would do it, because we get this whole series has been about Gojo being the strongest, right? He is the strongest. So when he loses and they come at Sukuna one by one, it was hard for me to be like, okay, there's going to be an opening. There's going to be something. And then eventually, of course, the trio has to work together at once for it to happen, which I love that. It was just kind of hard to believe, even after all of that that Sukuna would lose at that point.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was having a hard time believing it. That's why, like, for the longest, I was telling you, like, I'm rooting for Sukuna because at the end, it would be a pretty cool ending to see that the villain wins like that. You know?
Right. And I mean,
Uh,
up to this point, Gege has not been shy of letting
yeah.
people die.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it was a little bit hard. And I was even convinced for a little bit that maybe Gojo would come back. I mean, which kind of, but not in a way that meant very much.
Yeah. It was just so much going on. I think honestly, I think if I kind of wish they just never announced like how many chapters was left. I think if that was just kept quiet, the anticipation of like, all right, so what's going to happen probably would have been better. But I think
Right.
when for readers, when we found out like there's only a few weeks left, a month or two left, just like, all right, we're like pacing out and timing. You know, we only have so much space for what's going to happen.
Right.
You brought up Hiruguma, the lawyer,
Yes.
another fan favorite.
Yeah, he's awesome. I
yeah.
think his power is actually very cool. Gege excels with making up weird and cool powers. Also a weakness sometimes when you're getting 50 of them thrown at you at once.
Yeah.
But I think that power is something really cool. And we also get some insight to his character through that power, right? Because we see that he is also feeling a lot of guilt about what happened with Yuji. And we see that, you know, Judge Man has his own, like, he really has no control over Judge Man. It's just what he decides. So I feel like we rarely see characters who have like a really, really deep understanding of their own power. We do with Gojo, obviously, because he has to, otherwise he will destroy everything and himself in the process. But we rarely see a lot of these like kind of smaller characters really be able to manipulate their own power that they really don't have control over. So it was kind of cool to see him say, okay, well, in order for this to work, we have to make sure Judge Man does this, this, and this. And these are the different ways that he can judge. And, you know, this is how we can try to do it. These are the outcomes. So it was cool to see him also have to plot almost against himself, against his own technique to win. So I really like that about him. We get to see a lot of his own like battle prowess, which I think in the last arc we see a lot of from a lot of our characters.
Yeah, I think what made him one of my favorites too, just like seeing how quickly he learned how to do like the sorcery and jujutsu powers.
Yeah.
You know, like Sukuna calling him out, like you can heal, just reverse,
Yeah.
reverse curse, just do it, and he does it. You know, it's like wow, you know, so much potential in this character just to be taken out in the fight. But
I think at one point they even say that like he is like Gojo level.
Yeah, he's up there, yeah.
Yeah, that because he can learn so quickly, which I think that attributes to how he manipulates his own power. Obviously, he constantly has to be thinking. And I would love to just kind of attribute it to his lawyer profession, that he has to be thinking 24/7 about everything. But it was really cool to see someone who can have like not even innate, because he's just a guy, right? Like he's just some guy. But he almost like willed it. Like, as long as he could figure it out, he could do it, which I thought was really cool. I wish we got more of him too.
Yeah. I think a lot of these characters that they were showing towards the end, there's a lot of them that I didn't think that they'd even get to the end. I just thought that Gege was just writing them out to be like, all right, this is for a fight, certain fight or something. They're just, because the calling game, they're just like so many randoms, so many like new sorcerers, old sorcerers. So there were just so much. I just figured like they were just going to be there for the fight or for just that arc and then be done with it. But I was glad that they brought in some of those characters into the finale too. But I want to ask you this.
They kept some out. They kept some of our ones that we knew out. Like I thought Shoko would maybe do some things. I mean, Mei really didn't do all that much. Like some of them were just hanging out, and they're like, "You guys got it. No, that's fine."
Don't get me started on Shoko Salem. Like you open my eyes on her character too. Like just because she can't fight, and just her seeing like death after death after death, and like she was. I think you told me that like, I think it was you because we were talking about how Geto and Gojo were such good friends that they kind of left out Shoko. She was part of that trio, and her seeing her best friends die. No one asked her if she was okay. Like she
was alone. Right?
Yeah,
she's part of that generation that was just kind of left to their own devices. And I do think too, there's at one point where Gojo talks about like, no one will ever have to be alone again. And she's like, well, I was there. I was there with you. So we do see a little bit of that foil of like, was Gojo really alone? Like, was he alone or did he isolate himself. Like how much of this was Jujutsu and how much of this was Gojo, which I think is also a great foil, because then we have Shoko, who is just like, I'm always here and I always have to be the one to do all of this. I mean, she had to cut open Gojo in the end and like do
so
that,
sad.
you know. I wish we got more of her, because I think the emotional damage and like turmoil that she goes through is also a really great example of like what happens when you're the strongest, but what happens when you are the third strongest? Like what happens then? You're kind of isolated, but not really. You're isolated from your peers, but you're also isolated from the people who are lower than you. I think all three of them in that trio are a really good example of like what happens.
Yeah, I wish they had more of her character. I think that just showing that, like, if they put it in her point of view, I think that would have been really awesome to see. Like, you know, she's someone who's just healing everybody, and she's seeing death amongst her peers and then the students, and how is that affecting her? You know, knowing that you can't defend your teammates in a
Right.
physical way, you know, and again with how the ending was, and she just had to do what she did to her friends, and that I don't know, that breaks my heart. Like, you know, she's
Yeah.
you know, her seeing Geto's dead body, and then she sees Gojo's dead body. It's just like, you know, your best friends are in front of you, you know, like that's
Right.
just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I know. I don't think they ever said it officially, but I know some people kind of theorize too that the reason Gojo didn't want to bring Geto's body back was because he would be bringing it back to Shoko. So that was part of the reason he kind of left it, because he was like, I don't want to put her through that. But then, you know, then she got Gojo's body instead. So I think that's what a horrible thing for her.
Just slight tangent here. You know, I thought you know, we've messaged about like the dates of like how they happened.
Yes.
You know, Gojo and
Mhm.
Geto died in the same day. You know, like last Christmas, I messaged you with like Merry Christmas. You know, oh, also happy anniversary of Gojo's death. You know, like it just
Right. Yeah.
it
Well,
just
and in Japan, it is considered, so Christmas is like a romantic holiday. It's not really like a family thing like in the States. It's very much like a couple's holiday. So I don't think that was like a coincidence. And especially that they are, you know, Gege never does anything unintentionally, especially with dates. So I think that was kind of a cool thing to have, where, I mean, Gojo is the one that tells him this day, we're going to do it on this day. And then of course, Kenjaku was like, oh, how romantic of you. Like, I know where this is going. So I do think even up to that point, like Gojo is still holding on to his friend, which I think is like, all of it's very tragic.
oh yeah. You know, I think one of the, you know, it's been memed out as well, just like seeing when Getso confronts Gojo about, like, you know, are you the strongest because you're you, or because you're you, are you, that's why you're the strongest. You know, I think which is one of my favorite quotes in the entire manga. It's just like seeing Gojo question himself too, and to hear that from his best friend, that's what made it heartbreaking. Like he was like why, you know, like, you're someone who knows me
Right.
personally, and you're making me question my belief myself, you know. And I don't know, like, it just, aside from all the fighting, like when you look at the emotional impact of this manga, it's incredibly heartbreaking. Gege did
Yeah.
really well, just like hitting the feels of the readers with each of their characters.
Well, and I think too, a lot of that does happen between Gojo and Geto, because we get to see that interaction a lot more, of that kind of like really intense emotional stuff, especially when he's questioning him right in front of the KFC.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you been there?
I have. I went to the breakup KFC. But it is one of those things too, where you have to think from Gojo's perspective. I mean, throughout, even when we see the flashback arc, that it's never I. It's never I am the strongest. It's we. It's always we. And then at the very end of that, when he's in front and he's questioning him, Geto very much draws that line that everyone else has drawn with Gojo, but he has never drawn, of like, you are the strongest. How are you the strongest? Like, were you born that way, or is it you? And I think that probably is the moment that broke something in Gojo, because it was the first time that his best friend, who he saw as an equal, drew a line and was separating them. It was like,
Yep.
no, we're not equals. It's you. So that was just the pinnacle of Gojo's isolation, right? Because now there was no one else. So I think that echoes and ripples. Those consequences are throughout the rest of the series.
Yeah.
and it wasn't even Kenjaku that did it. You know what I mean? It was truly Geto that was drawing that line. And so I think it's reflected pretty well in Yuji and Megumi as well, that kind of emotional bond that they have. Obviously much more healthy, and that's the point, right? Because Gojo, I'm sure, saw them and was like, uh-oh.
Yeah,
let
they're
me
very similar. Yeah.
I've seen this movie before. You know what I mean? So I do think it's kind of nice that we get to see Gojo on like a parental level as well. Be like, okay, I know what happens with people like this. I'm going to try to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
I think that's also like, us being older readers of this of the manga, we kind of relate more to like the Gojo and Getos and the teachers. So I think that's what made me really like this manga, because like it's not like when we like if you read Naruto, like we're seeing Naruto's point of view. Now we're in us being older, we're in Kakashi's shoes now. We're in
Yeah.
we're in the teacher's shoes now. We're seeing like, oh man, this next generation is coming up and we have to help them, because if we don't, then they're gonna be,
The will of fire is
yeah.
happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's what made JJK like so good, seeing that Gojo's teachings to his students went all the way through to the end. Seeing Yuji go out of his way, even Yuta, all of them going out of their way to save Megumi,
Right.
and they were doing everything that they can to bring him back, because they already knew that Megumi was at his super lowest. His sister being
Right.
gone, his body being taken by Sukuna, and that's what made me like this, like overall arcing theme of what Gojo was trying to do for his
Right.
students. Don't be by yourself. You gotta be together.
Right. I do have a question for you, actually.
Okay, shoot.
Are you ready? Do you think Gojo thought that he was going to live through through
Ooh,
Sukuna's battle?
that's a good question. I think, and okay, I'll give two-parter. Initially, I would had I not like gone back and like reread and kind of like break down with you. Initially, I thought no. I always thought Gojo was going to win, just because of how OP his powers were. With Infinity, the Six Eyes, Gege wrote him up to be like this pinnacle top tier character that there's no way he's gonna lose. And unfortunately, when we read that manga chapter that he got taken out, it sucked, because there was no. I mean, Sukuna explains it, but like the panels didn't explain it. It just went from one chapter
It's
to
off screen.
yeah, one chapter of him like healing, like I got this fight, like nah, I'm gonna win, I got this. To the next chapter, and he just
In half.
on the floor, like
Yeah.
what happened, and I think that's what really shocked not just me and you, but like a lot of fans. It's like, whoa, Gege really just like said F you and took out
Right.
Gojo like that. But now thinking about it now, after like just kind of like digesting the story and characters, I think he knew. And even in the sad airport scene when he's talking to like Geto and Nanami and his crew, I think he knew. I think he kind of accepted that, yeah, he's gonna die, because he mentions that Sukuna was barely scratching the surface with his powers. And I think that's what made Sukuna such a great villain, because he was not only just powerful, but that guy was straight up evil. He wanted to kill Gojo, and
Yeah.
he had to find a way to take out Gojo with Megumi's powers. And yeah, I think he knew. I think he knew that he was gonna go, and I think that's why he was pushing so much on his students, like, stay together, get everyone, fight together, don't be by yourself. He was what we've been talking about in this show. Just like he wants them to, like I've said, if you're gonna fight together, you either live together or die together. There's don't leave anyone out. And I think that's what made Gojo's arc so beautiful, is because he knows what it's like to be by himself, seeing his best friends die, or seeing the people he couldn't save die by themselves. And yeah. But what about you? I'll throw that question back on you. Did you think he was gonna survive, or did you feel like he was gonna die at the end?
Sure. So it's difficult for me, because obviously I feel like a lot of people felt this way as well. And you do kind of have to dive more into his character. But a lot of what Gojo wasn't necessarily ego. I don't know if you can call it ego, because it was backed up, right? Because it was reality for him. So there is that side of me that was like, was it arrogance? Was it like, did he truly think that he was going to win? But I do think because of all the other circumstances, and once he kind of, got out of the prison realm and was realizing the situation, I think he knew almost immediately what was going to happen. Just because there was so much to go up against. And I mean, we see a little bit of it in the airport scene where he's talking to Geto and is like, hey, I'm kind of upset because like he didn't even have to try his hardest.
Yeah.
Like Sukuna wasn't even trying his hardest. Which I think in a great way is kind of closure for Gojo because he's not the strongest. That weight was lifted off of him right at the end, right? Which, I mean, can be seen as tragic because obviously he dies, but he got to die knowing that it wasn't on him. So that also meant because he wasn't the strongest, it meant that his students could be. So then it kind of gave them that opportunity to work together. And, I think he believed in his students. It was his whole point, right? Was to raise this generation up to be strong together. And he knew that an isolated strength was not enough for Sukuna. So I think he knew once he was out, I think maybe he was ready in there, like I'm going to win. But once he got out and realized what was happening, I think he knew pretty quickly. I'd like to think for his character, but maybe it was arrogance and he was just like, oh, I'm going to win. But we do see so much of his like actual battle strategy in real time in that fight. Though a lot of things are happening, we get to see how quickly his mind works and how really intelligent Gojo is when it comes to fighting, which is kind of insane to me considering he's never really had to try.
I think that's what it is too. I think maybe because he hasn't had to push himself to the max, that's why he feels like he could win because he doesn't even know his own real strength. Like
right, he's never had to push it to that level. Whereas we know Sukuna throughout the years has only battled like the strongest people throughout time. So I think it's maybe a little bit more experience versus innate ability. But it was really cool to see because we usually when we see Gojo fight people, it's like instant, right? Like he just wipes the floor with them. So it was cool to see a drawn out battle to see just how skilled he really was, even if it was at the very end. It was nice to see.
I think it was also great to see like Gojo getting hurt for the first time. Even for me, when I was reading the chapters where he's getting cut up, and he lost the hand initially, before healing.
Right.
Like, oh my God, like he's getting touched by Sukuna. It's crazy to see that. Okay, Infinity is not always going to save him. He has to be smart. But you brought up the airport scene, and I think the theme of them going like I forgot who said it, but they were like you either go north or you go south. Do you stay? Yeah, Nanami brings it up. I thought that was such a great theme too. Like you either move on or you do something new, and seeing them get together, and especially with Nanami after his death, like that pulled my heartstrings. I'm like, man, just seeing them get together.
Well, and it's nice too because we know that when they were younger, it probably still wasn't the best, right? Like they were still not having a good time. But Nanami obviously chose south because now he's his younger self, right? Like we see that he didn't move on. He's still there. A lot of them are still there. And it is nice to see them kind of reflect on their own lives and how it goes and seeing Gojo kind of joke with them and be at ease because they don't have, that responsibility pressing down on them anymore. So we get to see them in this natural state, which heaven, hell, whatever it is, just kind of this in-between where they get to just be, which is really nice. Especially even Geto is there. I mean, Toji's in the back of one of the panels, which is, I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know what he's doing there. I don't know if he's going north or south, but it is nice to see because we do get to see that kind of theme of, they talk about Blue Spring a lot in the anime like that. The whole intro is about Blue Spring with Geto and Gojo, like it being the time of their lives together. So we get to see that kind of encapsulated in this little scene of them kind of deciding what they want to do next.
Oh, you brought up Toji, and like I guess it didn't really hit me until like after rewatching season 2, where it's like when he looks at Megumi and he knows it's Megumi, but the sad part was like Megumi not knowing that's his dad. I think that was very sad to see, and of course how Gojo reveals that to him too was of course
Gojo dodged that responsibility. He said, "Shoko, you're going to be so emotionally damaged by the end of this, but I need you to tell Megumi something really bad I did."
Of course, in Gojo fashion, he's like, "Oh yeah, I killed your dad."
Yeah, oops, killed your dad. But I mean, honestly, we see that Megumi probably doesn't really care. But that's also kind of a cool thing that we get through the manga too, is that we know information that our characters don't.
Yeah.
So we get to see Megumi fighting his dad, and his dad realizing it in that split second and then immediately killing himself, which I think is really impactful. Because I think up to that point we see Toji as like, he's not a dad. Like, he doesn't care about Megumi. Like, he was just like pawning him off to Gojo. But I think Toji knew from the fight that Gojo was the strongest, even then, beating him, and that was Megumi's best chance. I think that was a little bit of a parental thing that was happening there. Of like, well, if anyone can get Megumi out of the Zenin clan, it's going to be this guy, this 16-year-old. Good luck.
The fact that a child is watching another child was like funny too.
I want to see what their life was like. Like, what is life like when Gojo is your guardian? It's got to be like, it's not good. It can't be good.
It's definitely comical. I don't know why I'm picturing it. It's like a comical slice of life for Gojo.
It's got to be like
I would watch yourself, Megumi.
They're eating cup noodles
all
3 meals. Like, I don't know. But it is nice to see that. And I wish we actually got more Megumi. I think that actually is a character that was also kind of sidelined. I mean, all of them were. Even Yuji. Like, Yuji was sidelined for a really long time.
Oh, yeah. The whole meme of like Yuji's not the main character,
right?
Like, oh man, it just, Yuji was a tough one because I feel like with Yuji, it was so hard to, even for me reading the manga, it was so hard for me to latch onto him as like a protagonist. Like, his powers aren't really explained. You just know that he's strong, and then like the only thing that kept me going on for Yuji was his backstory, like how he was made or what's his background. Because when they revealed that, and then like, them showing that, oh, Choso and him are related, Kenjaku had something to do with it, and of course all the memes of Kenjaku, getting his cheeks clapped, to do that, just to get someone strong like Yuji, like the extent that he went just to, have a chance of like finding someone to fight Sukuna or make someone to fight Sukuna, there was all that too. That's the only thing that kept me interested in Yuji's story. Outside of that, I was just like, I don't think Yuji's gonna survive.
Right. We don't get a whole lot of him. And I think that's true for a lot of the characters. I mean, obviously Nobara was in the hospital in a coma somewhere. Megumi, gets sidelined pretty quickly, not only just when he gets taken over by Sukuna, but like during all of those fights, like he's off somewhere else. Yuji, of course, is doing his own thing. I think when we're focusing on these other fights too, with all of these new characters, it's hard to also keep an attachment to the main three when we haven't seen them in so long. And I think that's also a weakness of reading week to week, right? Because we're reading and we get, a pocket of new characters. And then before you know it, it's been a month and a half, 2 months, and we haven't seen anyone from the main three. So it kind of takes a toll. But if you were to read it all at once, it wouldn't seem as long.
Yeah.
So I think that's also just reading week to week was hard with this manga as well.
I think that's what made it hard for me to kind of just like grasp these main characters, because again, with so many powers, so many characters, so many nuances in the story, and then you're just like trying to figure out what the plot twist is, what's Kenjaku's idea, what's Sukuna's idea, are they working together or are they going to screw each other over, there's just so much going on. And then the culling games, of course, being so expanded and like just fights after fights is just a lot to take in. But I wanted to ask you this though, with Kenjaku's character, do you think he's alive at the end?
I have such beef with Kenjaku. I really do. I think Gege does this with his villains. I don't think any of them are necessarily complex. I don't think he gives them enough time or emotion. Like, if Kenjaku was actually Geto, I think this would make the story so much more interesting. Because we would have all of those mixed emotions of Geto and like it kind of progressing into this almost like evil mastermind level kind of thing. But we just have Kenjaku, who is like, I just want to see something interesting, which realistically is what Sukuna is doing as well. They're just trying to fight because they like it, or they want to see, the strongest and try to beat them. So it's kind of the two main villains have the same kind of motivation. And I think it's a little flat. But when we get to the end, I think his fight with, I can't even remember her name. She controls matter.
Oh, Yuki, I think.
Yuki.
Yeah.
That fight with her and Kenjaku is probably my least favorite moment in the entire series. Because we finally get this girl who, by all means, is ridiculously overpowered. Like, to be able to control gravity and, like, you know, increase the mass of things, fight Kenjaku with Choso even. Like, that seems like a very well-balanced fight. And then we get Kenjaku pulling out a ton of new things. It's kind of a theme that happens in that last arc of like, haha, I have this other thing that is perfect for your thing. And she gets killed. It's just something to me that just doesn't sit right, but it's fine. But it kind of amplified the moment of Kenjaku's death, of being kind of like a joke, right? Like the whole thing was kind of funny and like not very serious. And if there was like story value to it, it would make sense to me, but I just didn't really understand. Maybe it's over my head. I don't know. Maybe people can explain it better to me. That's all it took was this guy trying to connect with Kenjaku on a soul level, which I guess if you dig deep enough, it's the isolation thing, right? Like Kenjaku has always been alone, and Taka, is his name just Taka?
Let me look it up. I call him the comedian because he
he kind of reaches out to Kenjaku in a way that no one else has before. Like he's sharing his dream of being a comedian. He's, doing all these kind of crazy, wild things with him, like having a good time with him almost. And that is what gives you enough time to kill him. Fine. I do think his last words were a little ominous of, my will be carried on.
Yeah.
It makes me think that maybe not Kenjaku coming back, but someone who embodies his plot, his plan to kind of merge everyone, which I almost think is just a device to continue if Gege wants to.
Yeah, that kind of threw me off too, because I was thinking that, with him saying that, I thought that was referring to Yuji or something. Maybe
Right.
Yuji would turn, or because like the question too was like, since he took over Yuji's mom at one point, what kind of powers did she have?
Right.
And that wasn't. I don't think was that explained at all, or no?
There's so much in the background with Kenjaku that is really just not touched on at all. So we don't get a whole lot from him before he dies.
Yeah,
and really, we don't get a lot from him in general.
Yeah, because like a lot of it is just up in the air, and then especially again with the ending, it's like you see the hair and everything with like, okay, so what
happened?
What happened? Yeah, what and of course like Kenjaku was someone who had such a huge plot going on in the show overall, and just like kind of just died down after Yuta took him out,
right?
And it just switched. They just switched to straight Sukuna, So
Yeah.
I don't know. I agree with you on that too. Just like two major villains kind of felt flat, like they weren't really working together, but they both had the same goal. And it just, I don't know. I felt some kind of way with Kenjaku for sure. I wish they did more with his character on like his reasonings. He just wanted to build a stronger world, kind of like Getso too, but it wasn't convincing to me.
No, the moral of the story is don't let yourself get bored.
Yeah.
Or you'll just become an evil villain. And I do think Yuta killing Geto twice, has some value to it.
Yeah.
But it also was such a short moment before it was like, okay, back to programming, like back to the main fight. I don't think Gege had enough time to focus on the things that he wanted to focus on, or maybe he didn't want to. I do think there were some scenarios that he kind of wrote himself into a corner and didn't, like, you get into these areas. I mean, we've seen it in Naruto even with, where it has to be like, okay, everyone's so strong. What do we do now? Aliens. We get to a point where you get to a certain level and you have to just like, okay, we just got to go. We got to move past this because we got to finish the story. So.
Yeah, I kind of wish if that was the case though. I kind of wish he did make the chapters shorter when Kenjaku and Takaba were. It was like what 4 or 5 chapters of just them having fun.
Geto in a nurse outfit.
Yeah.
They're doing stand up. Their beach scene. I do love that panel. I will confess, like it is beautifully done. Gege took his time and like drawing them in that little beach splashing each other. That was very cute. And I wonder if it was like for some relief, but it really didn't even feel like I needed relief because the people that were dying were people I didn't care about.
Yeah. I just think that was just like probably cosplay ideas that he had. He's like, ooh, just put Kenjaku in a nurse outfit.
Yeah, I want nurse outfits. So I mean, the whole last arc was kind of wonky, and I am looking forward to how the anime will handle it. It's the same way that I feel about Demon Slayer that's coming out. Like, there are so many fights that are about to be happening at once. Is it better for the anime to focus on one fight all the way through, or are we still going to get like it is in the manga where it's like switching back and forth the whole time?
Yeah. Well, we can go on this slight tangent here. I'm thinking that because it's in 3 movies, I was thinking it was going to be like one major fight each movie.
That's what I figured.
But then based on some of the fan movies and fan animations, I was like, it does make sense too, though, if they split up the fights in 3 movies. So I don't know.
Yeah, the pacing would make more sense if they are kind of scattered. But since they're going to be in movie form and it'll be 3, they could realistically do it that way, all the way through. I don't know. I'm always interested to see how it translates to animation, because it has to be handled differently.
Yeah, I mean, with the Culling games having so many fights, I'm just hoping that they don't rush this next season with just like, I mean, of course, there's gonna be a lot of fights, but I just hope that they kind of give the spacing right. We don't want like
poor animators.
It's, of course, being Mappa, we know
Right.
we know what they do over there, so they're just gonna like give chunks of big fights with like little to no story progression. That's something I don't want to see either. The fights are great, but it'll, for me, I feel like as a viewer, it'll kill the story. Like, okay, we these fights, but like, what's going on? It's just gonna be season 3, just straight up fights, So,
right? Yeah, my brother only watches the anime, and at the end of this most recent season, he came to me. He's like, I almost don't care about the next season. He goes, because like what else is gonna happen? Like, they've killed off so many people, and like he's like, I don't really care about what's going on. And I was like, well, unfortunately, I wish Shibuya had happened later. I think if it happened later in the series, it would be much more impactful. But 2, having all those crazy fights beforehand would have been fine, because we'd have the payoff of the Shibuya incident, of it kind of all culminating together. But of course, it was kind of flipped, that we have all of these characters that we have grown to love kind of just die, and then immediately get introduced to 100 new characters who also just die, and then straight into more people dying.
It's kind of much like Attack on Titan-esque.
Yes, like, I do think Attack on Titan does it well, because it's this big emotional, you care about it. And you do, I think that's
I think that's what they did well with Attack on Titan, though. Like, you care about your characters.
Exactly.
And then they get taken out.
Exactly. Like, I could not tell you a time I've been more distressed watching or reading a piece of media than when Hanji died. Like, I was devastated for days. But where something like, even when Gojo died in Jujutsu Kaisen, I was like, dude, that sucks. But like,
that's how I felt.
That makes sense.
The impact wasn't there. I was more upset that I didn't see him die. I was more upset about that.
We didn't even see any of the characters' real reactions. We get like a panel of them going like, oh, and I would have liked to see more emotion, or like maybe a quick conversation before they have to run out there, something to kind of show the impact. And that's part of the tragedy too, right? Because I mean, right till the end, Gojo was kind of seen as nothing but a weapon. And once he was no longer a weapon, nobody cared.
Yes, I applaud you on that. Thank you for bringing up that theme for Gojo, because that's one theme that, like, again, we talked about Gojo a lot in this podcast. So but that's one of the big themes for Gojo, is like, how he sees himself, how Jujutsu sees him, how his students see him. Is he just a person? Is he a teacher? Is he a weapon? And kind of touches up on what Yuta was saying. He's willing to be that monster. None of us are willing to do that. I'm going to be the one that does that. And then when Yuta takes over Gojo's body, and you kind of see the sacrifice that Yuta's doing, because he was willing to do what Gojo was doing. And that's why I liked Yuta so much in this show, because he was someone that stepped up amongst his peers. And
I think Yuta does answer the question that Geto asked, right? Was Gojo the strongest because he was born that way, or was he strong because he was who is the strongest? And when we see Yuta enter Gojo's body, if it was just because Gojo's innate ability, Yuta should have been able to win.
Yep.
And we see that he doesn't. So it wasn't that, he was born the strongest and this was just his role and he was just a weapon. It was because it was who he was that made him strong. And I think what a tragedy for everyone to be able to know that at the end, that it wasn't, he wasn't some freak of nature that was strong and, it was just him. It was because he willed it that he was the strongest. And I think we see those panels too. I think, was it right before the Shibuya incident where everyone's asking about Gojo, like, what do you think about Gojo? And, everyone says little things about him, like, oh, he's annoying or whatever else.
Yeah.
And at the end, everyone is, well, he's the strongest. And the panel of Gojo standing there, he doesn't look happy. He doesn't, he's not with all of the people around him. It's just him kind of with his head down. And then he's the strongest, just kind of plastered there. So I think that was something that was more of a burden to him than anything else.
Did you think Yuta was going to die after that whole incident of him like switching the brains and all that?
I did, purely because, they were just killing people. And at this point, I knew that he wasn't, listen, in my heart, I knew it was because Gojo was Gojo, not because he was the strongest. So I was like, Yuta's not going to be able to win in his body. So what happens after that? And realistically, I feel like it should be he dies, but then we get to see why Shoko's the strongest and what she does, right? Like she kept him alive. Through that whole process, which is insane to think about because really you shouldn't be able to. He was cut in half. So not only did she put him back together, but switched their brains. And then after that, switched them back to where, he could function again. Yuta could live. And I just don't think we got to focus enough on like Shoko's sheer feats, but maybe that's the point. She's the invisible strongest of those three. She's doing crazy work in the background.
Yeah. Kind of sucks that she doesn't get like a lot more credit, for being a support character.
Even with Gojo and Geto, she doesn't.
Yeah.
They were out having their little break up, whatever you want to call it. And she's just like, you guys, what?
There's just so much to explore with JJK, right? Because there's so many characters. And then of course, like, who was it? Who was that character that you don't like? The one that had controversy with her brother. Was it Mei? Yeah, because you don't like Mei, and
so unnecessary. But she is a foil. And I think she's a foil for Nanami. And I think that was confirmed for me when she actually goes to Malaysia, which is where Nanami wanted to go when he retired or like when he was done. We see Nanami who is doing it not for money, obviously, not for anything else, but because it fulfills him, because it's something that he knows is, the right thing to do. And we see that even in his death. Like he was so focused on like shielding that generation where like Gojo is trying to raise them up and make them stronger. Nanami wanted to kind of shield them and take on the burden for them. So we see many different ways that they're kind of trying to protect or, make sure the next generation is having a different experience than they did. And then we have Mei, who is like weird. She's doing it just for money. Gojo has to pay her for everything that she does, no matter what it is. As soon as things get tough, she kind of just leaves and is like, okay, see you later. And then obviously with her brother, we see that she's kind of like a predator, where Nanami is very much protecting the youth and making sure that they're okay, is putting himself in the danger for them. His famous line is, it's not a sin to be a child. Like, go be a child. Where we have Mei committing sins with children. It's a very good foil. And I think it is an example of not enough time. We get little flickers of it and I pick them apart, but I do have to try pretty hard to get the backup for it. But her being in Malaysia at the end is kind of just a real kick of like Nanami is dead because he was protecting them and she is alive and in Malaysia because she didn't care.
As much as I don't like her character, I think it's also like, what Gege does well in this show is like, or in his writing is like showing you the real world.
Yeah.
People, as fucked up as Mei is, like they people like that live, and and then that's just part of the world.
I think her character design is really cool. I love her big axe thing. Like, everything about her is like her powers are really cool, all of that stuff. So I do think he does a really good job of like creating these characters and also being like, hey, they're also terrible.
Yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly. Yeah, people, she gives off like a good hero kind of vibe, and no, she's selfish. She does it for herself, and like you said, she puts her brother on the
sacrifices her
line.
brother multiple
Yep,
times in that fight. Like, okay, well, would you die for me? Go in that coffin. Hopefully
yep,
it'll work. Like the exact opposite of what Nanami did.
exactly. And she lives, and she's living Nanami's dream, which is, like you said, a kick. Like, wow, this lady's a bitch. Like, she's fucked up. And then you have someone who's like Nanami, who deserves to have a send off or a retirement. To have his own personal time to have fun and relax. No, he dies for his students. He
Right.
does what's right. And
That is the real world theme there,
yeah,
right? Is that the good guys don't always get what they deserve, and the bad
yes,
guys definitely don't.
yeah,
So I do think that was a good foil for side characters, really, because I mean they're only focused on in the first couple of arcs, and then we kind of lose them for a while. I mean, Nanami for sure we lose, but Mei was just kind of doing her own thing.
yeah. I mean, even to the end, like, she was just doing her. She didn't really care. She
No,
was like,
her brother was putting in work though.
yeah. No, I like that too. Like how his powers are finally explained, not just swapping places, but also swapping the soul, which I thought
Yeah.
that was a pretty good good way. Good. It was a humorous thing too, where when Sukuna asks him like, how'd you guys get so strong, and Yuta's like, we cheated. Like, it was just we just swapped bodies and learned each other's powers. So I thought
Right.
that was pretty funny. Um, but I guess since with Sukuna being brought up, he's also one of the main topics or main themes in the show, right? Being someone who is just seeking power and wants to be the strongest, and like you said, someone who's just bored because no one can challenge him. And seeing Sukuna's point of view of the world, and seeing how he looks at like the other sorcerers and his peers, and hell, even Yuji, he looks down on everyone, because he knows he's great. So what were your thoughts on just his character arc, and even up to the end where where he decides to go, was it north? He decides to take a different direction in his life.
But he goes with someone, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that is really great as well. And I do wish the theme of Jujutsu Kaisen for me is I wish Gege had more time. Because we do see it obviously through the fights, where he is talking with people, and obviously like he calls Yuji boy all the time. Like he really looks down on Yuji. And when he's fighting, he's like, oh, can you keep up? Like he's kind of taunting, like he knows he's stronger than all these different people. But then, we get towards the end, and of course the thing that makes him stop is the trio working together, and now he's in this domain. But it's talking like on a level playing field, because in the domain he doesn't have the power, right? And I think it takes that situation for him to finally come down from where he's at on his pedestal to have a real conversation with someone, and that someone is Yuji, who actually pretty like knows him very intimately at this point. They've been housed together. So I do think it's really nice and kind of like a foil to Gojo, right? Like we've seen what the strongest does in this time period, where isolation is obviously something that happened, and Gojo works against it to fix it. Where we have Sukuna, who's been throughout, all of time, who we don't even really understand how old he could be. He's just super, super old, who's never cared to fix it. He just wants to keep going. And then finally, Yuji is able to kind of talk to him and open his eyes, maybe not even open his eyes, but just make him have a little bit of doubt of like, it could be different. Things could be different for you. And this is your opportunity. And do you want to see something new, or do you want to just keep doing the same thing you've always been doing? And I do think that kind of circles back to Kenjaku, right? Like if Yuji gave that option to Kenjaku, he's going. Like he's going to go do something new. That's his whole thing, is he wants to see something he's never seen before. And so I think he finally kind of gave that little bit of doubt to Sukuna of like, well, I could do something different, and maybe he won't keep to it. But I do like that at the end there, he goes with someone else. So he's not alone, and that's something new.
Yeah, I really like that. It took Yuji doing the all talk no jutsu to get to them. It's tropey, but it's true. Someone like Sukuna who's never had the time to talk to anyone. Like he finally understood. Like that's why I kind of like at the end he kind of acknowledged Yuji at the end a little bit too. He's like, maybe he says something, that kind of sparked me, because at the end when he sees Mahito, Mahito's like, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna come back and do it all over again, or are you gonna change
Right.
it? And so Sukuna's like, no,
It's
maybe I'll
his
go.
airport scene. It's his airport scene.
It's like, maybe I'll just go a different direction. And what was it? It was Urame, right? That he was holding hands with
Yes.
at the
Yeah.
end. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I thought that was very, very sweet of him to be like, because he was always by himself. And again, like the theme we've been talking about, he finally went with Urame and
Yeah. Well,
decided
I
not
mean,
to
we
be by
even
himself.
see when like Arami gets introduced, like
Yeah.
Sukuna is genuinely happy to have someone. He's
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, like there
It's
you
been
are.
so long. Yeah.
Right, which is like we have not seen anything like that from Sukuna up to that point. So it
Yeah.
is kind of nice that throughout this entire time there has been a person, which makes me also feel like that was the Shoko, right?
Yeah.
Someone who was always there, but you never acknowledged that they were because you were so caught up in the isolation of it. So it is nice to see all those kind of themes come together for Sukuna there at the end, and I think Sukuna's character design is one of my favorites, and he's just more interesting to me than Kenjaku, just because his motives make more sense to me. Like a really old being who is, super powerful. He's just evil to be evil. Fine, that's enough for me for that. So it is cool to see that Yuji can get to the level of strength to put Sukuna in a position to listen. And I don't think that's ever been done before for him. So it's nice to see that.
It was just nice to see how he was also just challenged by Yuji. Of all people to to challenge him, it wasn't just physical, but Yuji challenged him mentally, and
Right.
like put him on the spot. Like, dude, I'm giving you one last chance. Like, if you don't want to change, then I can kill you on the spot.
Right.
And I think that's something that for someone as strong as Sukuna is, like, he's never received mercy, so he
Right.
doesn't know what that's like, and he's so used to killing off everyone he doesn't like, so that he doesn't know what it's like to give mercy either. And so I think that's a great way to kind of show, like, someone like Sukuna can also kind of, as much as evil as they are,
Yeah.
they can slightly change. Like, is it the greatest? No, but words can still get to him, and I think that's why Sukuna was one of my favorites too. Like, just he's realistic in an evil aspect. Like, I'm glad that they didn't give him the Kurama or Obito treatment.
Yeah.
I'm
no.
so glad they didn't do that. They kept him evil and just petty throughout the whole manga.
Yeah.
So, like, that's why he was one of my favorite villains, and I think that's why, like, seeing him just, like you said, taunting throughout the fights and just talking smack, like he's evil. Like the heroes had to really, dig deep and take him out before he won. And we joked about this earlier too. Had he let's say had he won at the end, would you be okay with that?
I'm always rooting for a bad end, because it's so rarely done, right? Like we rarely ever see something like that happen, because it would not be a fan favorite, right? Like people would be very upset. So even like for Attack on Titan, I was ready for everyone to die. Like I thought that was it. So for this specifically too, just because of the way that the fights were going and how things were playing out, I thought it was a real possibility that could be what it was. And I mean, I think there would still be a story there where, what happens after the good guys lose? Like the goal was to merge everyone, right? So what happens then? Is that the end? Is it like a Evangelion, like congratulations scene? Everyone's one thing, and then that's it. And that would be fine. And as long as it was done in a way that made sense, I think I would have been okay with it. Because I'm always ready for the good guys to lose. And it'd be like, see, sometimes it doesn't matter. So, but I am glad it ended the way that it did. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I was definitely rooting for Sukuna to win, only because, like, again, with like how media shows, like, when Empire Strikes Back or Infinity War, like the movies, when the villains win, it's like, holy shit, like,
right.
yeah,
It's
even
much
to
more
this day,
impactful.
yeah, like to this day, it's like, man, like everyone, we've seen it repeated in media, but every time the villain wins at the end of the movie or show, it's like, wow, like they really went that way, because we're so used to seeing good triumph at the end, right? And I think
Right.
with JJK, I think if Gege let Sukuna win, that would have been perfect for, like, just for him to show his audience, like, hey, this is still my story.
Right.
Your fan theories, your fan fictions, none of that mattered. Like, I'm in control. So, like, I would not have been mad either. I probably would have been, like, applauding for it.
I do think I'm interested to see what he does from here. I do think that he's probably going to return to it at some point. Just the way that he left things kind of ambiguous, which I mean, he could just drop it and that would be it. But I do remember reading somewhere that they were like, "Oh, Gege wants to do like a romance manga next in between," and I was like, honestly, I would watch that. I would read it.
I probably would too.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm interested to see where he takes it, to see because like what does happen next after that, because it's not like they eradicated curses, you know.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. They're still one of Sukuna's fingers.
They don't have Gojo anymore,
Yeah.
which is really still a big deal,
Yeah.
because now they all have to figure out who's going on those missions.
And also, like, you know, with the Jujutsu world being changed too, like I think what Yuta's the head of the clan now, so like you got
Yep.
his family. I thought that was cool too, like the little epilogue they had. You know, Panda at the end. Panda was still like semi alive. You know, like
Yes.
he's still there. He's slowly turning away, but like he's still activated once in a while. So I thought that was cool. Who else? Like there's just so much.
There's
Like,
so many characters.
so many characters and things. It's hard to keep track of everything because honestly, we could talk about this topic for hours.
Right.
But you know, for fans, you know, if there's any like things that we missed here, please comment them below or you know let us know on like social media and stuff. But before we wrap things up here, Salem, I'm so happy to talk to you about like JJK. I've been looking forward to this for the longest. I'm kind of glad we talked about it now because I think had we talked about it like right after the manga ended, I think our opinions would have been a lot different.
Yes, it was good to sit with it for a while because I remember when I read the ending, I was like, I need to put it down for a minute. No, it's good to sit and kind of resonate with it for a while to kind of reflect on the series as a whole rather than, you know, the last couple months of reading week to week and being stressed out and trying to figure out what's going on.
Was there any last words you had to say about JJK before we wrap things up?
What a ride. It was great. I think Gege covered a lot of themes that a lot of mangas try to do in a surface level way. Granted, you do kind of have to dig in JJK sometimes to get to them, but I do think they were portrayed in a really beautiful way. And also, domain expansions are one of my favorite things art-wise. Like Malevolent Shrine is gorgeous, like the way that he draws them. So just overall, like I think this was a great series. I think it was a great series. I think the themes are great. The art is good. The pacing, it's a shonen, so I give it grace. Overall, I mean, everyone should read it. I think it's worth it.
100% agree. You know, like domain expansion to me has been like the new Bankai. Right? Like, yeah, exactly. Everyone's saying Bankai. I'm like saying domain expansion from time to time. Just, you know, it's fun to say. But yeah, you know, this show and this manga has been like super great in today's modern media. You know, and I'm glad that you know, despite the manga being finished, we're still getting more of it in animation form. I just hope that like you know, like we discussed, hopefully they do things differently in the pacing of the story. I'm just excited to see the highlights of these, like of the fights. Again, you know, there's Yuta's trio fight. You have Maki taking out the Zenin clan.
Right, that's gonna be insane.
And then you have you know the Kenjaku Yuki Choso fight. I believe okay. So where do you think season 3 is gonna end? Because this is something I asked some of the voice actors too.
I have no idea. I don't know where would be like a good ending. I mean, yeah, I don't even know. I don't know where they would end it because it just feels like one big, like there are multiple arcs, but it is all just it's fighting the whole time.
Because I was thinking that a great ending, of course, would be Sukuna taking Megumi's body.
Yes,
but I feel like that's just so long.
It's a lot
in the Culling game. So I was like, if they do animate that much, but
maybe him and his sister.
I was thinking like where Kenjaku takes out Yuki. I was thinking that probably would have been.
Yeah, that might be a good one too. Honestly,
like a good season 3 ender.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would. I mean, it's an impactful moment. Unfortunately, when you're reading it, it's very quick, and you're like into the thing. So I think if they really focus on it and make that the end, I think that would be good.
But yeah, but it's just like it's all up in the air, and then people, fans are like, no, we want the ending to be where Gojo gets out the prison room. Like, dude, that's so far
That's so
ahead,
far.
like
It's so far.
that's
There's
so
no way.
far. So I honestly, I hope that they don't rush the animation either, because like, God forbid they do like Blue Lock style and just
Oh,
freaking
bad. Bad.
PowerPoint, like I would be so mad.
This size.
I would be
Horrible.
so mad.
Yeah.
But
I
it would
think
be
it's
rough.
popular enough that it won't. I mean, here at least, like the pop-up cafe stuff, the pop-up shops, like all the stuff across Tokyo, like it's constantly Jujutsu Kaisen. Like for Shibuya Sky, they just had a Shibuya arc like crossover with Jujutsu Kaisen and Shibuya Sky. So it was like a whole big thing. So it's definitely still very popular here.
Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it. We've covered what we could. Like I said, I could go on. I just
There's so
don't want
much.
to take up. Yeah, I just don't want to take up so much time.
Yeah.
So fans and listeners, go and read Jujutsu Kaisen. Watch the anime if you haven't. Go follow Salem. Go check out her adventures in Japan. It's so cool to see her. Go and travel and make friends, and it's awesome. I feel like I'm on that adventure with you.
Yeah.
So I really like
So glad.
looking at your stories.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is episode 182. Thank you guys for listening. Go like, share, subscribe. Again, go follow Salem. Thank you guys so much, and have a great day.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give a review and rate Spoiler Force Podcast. If you want to get all Spoiler Force updates or even peeks at behind the scenes, you can join the Spoiler Force Discord community. And if you'd like to show support, give tips, recommendations, sponsorships, or any collaborations, you can email me at rickyvang92@gmail.com.